Hey, what's up, you guys? Okay, so in this textbook, Principles of Macroeconomics by Gregory Mankiw, um, they talk about fractional reserve banking, and really any basic macroeconomics text is going to talk about this. Um, and they give this example here, how it works as far as like deposits are made in a bank, and then what that does to them, or then loans are made, what it does to the money supply, etc. So I kind of wanted to demonstrate one of these examples using this kind of like simple program that models this. Let's see here. Okay, so with the first example in the book, basically there's $100 of cash in the economy, and the bank has a totally blank balance sheet, right? So we're going to deposit that cash in the bank using this slider here, right? Um, and what I wanted to point out is when you move this slider, the values that will be affected are shown in parentheses, like the proposed values, and then they'll actually change when you hit this button. Um, and the reason I set this up with this way is because when I'd been reading about like fractional reserve banking, um, in the text, the way they describe, when certain things happen, okay, certain things on the balance sheet are affected in this way. And for this basic example, it was fairly clear. But when they get into the more complex examples, it wasn't always clear, like what the implications were. Like when they add securities, or when securities gain profit, or when somebody defaults on a loan, like, okay, what are all the ramifications? And so that's what I wanted to identify with, like with a tool like this to make it clear, what the changes are when these happening. So anyway, that's when I move this deposit slider, that's what you see here in parentheses in these purple values here. So like in the example, we want to go and deposit the full $100 in cash, right? And we can see that when we do that, what's going to happen is cash was zero. It's going to, oh, excuse me, cash is currently 100, it's going to zero. Deposits was zero, it's going to 100, and reserves is zero, it's going to 100. And so far, the money supply is stayed 100. It has not changed. We're moving from cash to deposits, and so the money supply is still 100. So let's go ahead and commit that change. Okay, and so now the values are there. Reserves is 100, deposits are 100. Something else that has changed is the excess reserves are now 90. What excess reserves is basically what's available for loans. Okay, so now the next step in the book is they actually do the loan, right? So we have the loan slider, and now that we have reserves, we're allowed to move the loan slider, right? So if we move that, now we can see what else is changing. And so I'll just drop it here, and we can see, as we increase the loan slider, cash is going to go up, right? Because now we're putting cash back out into the system. Here, I'm just assuming that whatever, somebody got a loan, we're just going to give them some cash to simplify the model. That's kind of how the book talks about it as well. Reserves, of course, is going to go down. The loans and the assets is going to go up, right? Now customer owes the bank money. The excess reserves, as you can see here, goes down, and critically, and this is the key step here, is the money supply increases, right? Um, it didn't increase upon deposit, but it does technically increase when the loan is made. So now we're going to commit the loan, and there we can go. We can see money supply is now not 190. So we started with a money supply of 100, but through the deposit and something else, through the deposit and then the loan, that's what actually increased the money supply. The way I look at it is when you move deposit, it's almost like that's the prerequisite for the money supply to increase. It's technically not, the money supply doesn't yet technically increase, I guess is how you can look at it. But what happens is when you do this, notice that both sides of the balance sheet increase, the deposits and the reserves, and and well, due to fractional reserve banking, right here it's showing a reserve ratio of 10%. Some of this is available to lend out. So with the deposit, you set up the prerequisite, and then finally, the loan actually is what causes the money supply to go up. Okay, and I guess one more thing I wanted to point out was part of the example in the book shows that if you repeatedly if you take the $100, you deposit it, and then they lend it out, and then that gets deposited again to maybe like another bank, and then you lend it out, and you keep doing this repeatedly. Eventually, the $100, you'll have a total money supply of $1,000 from that $100 because of the 10% reserve ratio. And you can model that here, right? So let's just, well, I started from scratch, so we'll do a deposit of 100, and then we'll kind of max out the loan. And so money supply is at 190, right? And we'll just keep doing this, right? Deposit, loan, deposit, loan, kind of just keep doing that over and over again. And you'll see the money supply is going up. And eventually, if you keep doing this, it approaches but never hits 1,000. It'll get into the 900s if you do this long enough. Somebody might say, well, you're doing this with a single bank, whereas in the book they modeled this with, like, in theory, let's like multiple banks. Well, it, it kind of still works with this because the idea would be, um, somebody deposits their money and then they make a loan, let's say to somebody else, obviously, and and that's somebody else. Now the cash, the $90 is out and floating around the economy somewhere, and that person can go and have a transaction with somebody else. They might buy something, and then that other person can come back to the same bank and then deposit it, right? So now they can do the deposit and then do a loan. So, anyways, I think technically it's, even though this is modeling only a single bank, you can still demonstrate that phenomenon, and I think it still makes sense. Okay, so later on in the book, he labels here a more realistic national bank, and this one is involving, um, it's an example involving debt, capital, securities, loans, and so let's go through that example. So what I'm going to do is set up the balance sheet the way we have here. I'm going to move this off screen. Um, so deposits are 800. So I'm going to go ahead and update the cash here. I'm going to change this. So the way this works is I'm going to inject more cash into the system, as if I were the Federal Reserve or whatever. So I'm going to slide this up. I'm going to add 700, so it'll bring us up to 800 cash. And let's see here. Debt is 150, so I'm going to also bring debt up. Let's see, to 100, and then bring it to 50. Okay, capital is 50 as well, so we're going to add capital. And none of this is drawing from the outside cash. It's just, we're magically injecting this. So capital is 50. Okay, next is, let's see here. Okay, so deposits is set to 800. So let's go ahead and update that. We have our cash 800 here. So let's do a deposit right there. Bring it up to 800. Okay, so now our deposits on the balance sheet are 800. Now let's do a loan. If we look at the example, the loan's set to 700. So we will do a loan for 700. Let me drag this up here, leave it at 700. Sorry, the slider is so sensitive. There we go. Okay, do the loan. And then finally, there's $100 of securities. So what we're going to do is we're going to buy securities right here. Well, we'll buy a security for 100 bucks. And we can see that when we do buy it, this is the first time we've done this in this video, we're drawing from the reserves. So reserves will go down, security goes up, securities goes up. So let's buy that. And let's just review. Yeah, so our balance sheet matches their balance sheet in the example. So we're good. So the first scenario they demonstrate with this starting balance sheet is what happens if there's a gain on the security. So the bank, invested in some security. There was a profit. In the example, they say that there was a gain of $50. So let's model that right now. So on the securities profit slider, let's drag that up to 50. And let's see here, almost there. There we go. So when we do that, we can see what changes. Well, securities goes from 100 to 150. Capital is going to go from 50 to 100. And that's what they talk about in the book. Whereas, like, if you look at the total assets, assets only go up 5%. That was the $50, but capital doubles. It goes from 50 to 100, and that is demonstrating the leverage ratio, right? Leverage ratio was 20, and so that's how they got such a gain on their capital. Um, so let's go ahead and commit that, and so there's the new changes. Okay, so I went ahead and paused the video and I reset the balance sheet to the starting example in the book. For the second example, so in the first case, there was a gain on the securities on the balance sheet. In the second example, they show what happens if somebody defaults on their loan. And it's kind of the same deal, but in the opposite direction. So instead of having a gain of $50 on the assets, there's a loss of $50 on the assets. So to model that, there's this loan default slider, and we will slide it up to 50. I'll drop it right here. Okay, so when we do that, so what changes? The loans is going to go from 700 to 650. So it's an asset, right? We expect normally we'd get $700 back from some kind of customer, plus interest, but I'm not going to model that, right? So normally when we get our money back from here, it goes back into the reserves, right? But since this is a default, we lose the $50 on the asset, so it goes from 700 to 650, and it comes out of now the both sides of the balance sheet have to balance, so it comes out of our capital. So our capital was 50, now it's zero, and so that's the demonstration of the fact that when your leverage ratio is 20, um, a 5% decrease in assets results in a 100% loss of capital. So again, it's just demonstrating the leverage principle. So I'm gonna go ahead and commit that loan default there. All right, so there's our new balance sheet. And then it goes a little further and says if you go any further than that and have any losses, so like if we just drag this up a little more, whatever, like even a loan default of 10 or really any, um, let's see, I'll try to, yeah, loan default 10. What happens now is, sure, the loans go down, but our capital was already zero, and so it's registering here as negative 10 when we do that. It's kind of nonsensical. And at this point, as soon as, at least as far as the model is concerned, when capital goes below zero, the bank's insolvent, and that's what that's supposed to show. Was that just a 5% drop in assets ended up pretty much on the verge of insolvency, and any further loss than that caused actual insolvency. So anyway, that's all I wanted to demonstrate here. Like I said, when I was reading through this section, I wanted to fool around with examples like this, and I did searches on the internet for bank simulators, and I found all these kind of cool games and other things. Some of them extremely complex, but I didn't find any that were just you know directly based on something this simple. So if you know of any, feel free to comment. I would like to see some more. I also used like spreadsheets for a while, like trying to model this, and that gets a little bit awkward. So anyways, I found this to be helpful, like I say, to get a little better intuition for what happens when you change some of these values or some of these transactions occur. So all right, thanks. Take care. Bye.